I want to talk about Concord, and no, it's not just to shit on its grave, like I think a lot of people bring up Concord to do. I want to talk about specifically this article that's in Forbes. I also saw one in Games Radar, though the article in Forbes I find is much more detailed. That Colin Moriarty, who is a podcaster, a writer, and a former video game journalist, that he spoke with a developer that worked on Concord, and that they gave him a lot of context about the game's development. And I want to talk about this, and then I kind of want to give um, a perspective on it that I think a lot of people are missing. I think it's so easy when it comes to Concord to focus on um, being very negative about it in a way where you're blinded from any kind of nuance to the conversation. And especially if you're one of those people that's focused on DEI and wokeism and all that kind of crazy right wing kind of stuff, where you just hate Concord for being Concord. Um, so in that article, Colin Moriarty says that this developer told him that Concord cost $400 million to make. And a lot of people are disputing that or wondering if that's true because Spider-Man 2, for instance, cost around 300 million. Last of Us Part 2 was 220 million or so. So that's so much money that it's almost hard to believe given the final product. But let's just say for the sake of argument, because Colin Moriarty has no reason to lie, and from what we understand, his source that he verified himself has no reason to lie. So let's take it on face value for the sake of this conversation. So $200 million of that was invested before Sony got involved, or when Sony was involved with it, but it was not quite, it was like in development up until the alpha. And then after the alpha was created, which apparently was in a rough state, then Sony invested another $200 million into the project to get it to a viable product stage. So that same developer also said that there was a toxic positivity culture within the team. This idea that Concord would turn out all right because they were all competent developers, and why wouldn't it? And I think a lot of people, they look at that and they say, "Wow, these guys are so stupid. How could they fall for that kind of nonsense?" I feel like it's very easy to say that from a position where you are outside of the development. You don't have any of the pressures that these developers had on them, and you have the benefit of hindsight. You know, we look at it and we go, well, how could you not see it was going to be a failure? Because we already know it's a failure, and we already, you know, by the time it finally got to beta level, we could all sort of see the writing on the wall. But I want to kind of turn the narrative a little bit. I want you to follow me here. So Ryan Ellis, right, the director on Concord, started out, you know, he was at Bungie, started out doing like art for things like Star Wars The Force Unleashed. Eventually ended up at Bungie working on Destiny. Destiny's the big thing that he's kind of known for, right? So he's on Destiny, he's the technical art director. um, and then on Destiny 2, he's the creative director. So he moves up, right? He goes from being the technical art director to the creative director. It's a lot more of an expansive role, right? And by this point, you'd imagine this guy has quite a lot of experience with world building, a lot of experience with fleshing out a big creative. Because I think sometimes it's easy to forget how much of a risk Destiny was for Bungie, right? They had this series Halo that made printed money like crazy, and Bungie said, "We want to do our own thing. We want to try to create a massive AAA game in a genre that at the time was not exactly, you know, well tread ground, right? And create our own creative vision, our own world, all that kind of stuff." So this guy was on the ground floor for that, and one would have to imagine a pretty major piece of that. So when he gets to Firewalk and he gets to direct his own game, by this point he has a lot of experience doing this, doing world building, working on a major creative vision, and there's a lot of people at Firewalk that are former Bungie devs, so he's around people that he trusts, one would imagine. And so he starts fleshing out this creative vision, right? And when you make a creative vision, and by a creative vision, I mean world building, lore, what characters should look like based off of the concepts of the world that you've created, where everything clicks together and makes sense within a what's the word I'm looking for? And it's a logic that's established for this world, right? You kind of you kind of got to be confident in that, right? I mean, I don't think, I'm not comparing Concord to these worlds in terms of quality, but I don't think, Token or George Lucas with Star Wars or I don't know, C.S. Lewis with Narnia. I mean, they can't second guess themselves too much. At a certain point, you've kind of created a world with a design and a style, and everything has to stem from that. And I mean, apparently Concord, according to that article about this former or current, I think, Concord developer, um, or at least Firewalk developer, right? They said that within Sony and within Firewalk, this was discussed as a Star Wars, right? Star Wars level product. They thought this was going to be something that was an expansive universe that would spawn, maybe shows, multiple spin offs, different genres of games outside of the hero shooter, right? So you're building a massive creative vision here. Ryan Ellis is, along with the rest of the team at Firewalk, right? You've got to be strong in that. You've got to believe in your vision. So when people look at Concord, they often criticize the character designs, the entire world design. It's one of those things where if this is a runaway train, right? If Concord is doomed to failure, no matter like what happens, if Concord is a runaway train, the train lost its brakes at the station because that massive creative vision that if it's Star Wars level most likely had a lot of money poured into it. If that's the problem, which a lot of people feel it is, that's the foundation. And when it comes to this toxic positivity thing, where apparently criticism was being stifled, with this idea that this Bungie kind of mentality that everything will come together because they're too competent for it not to, I have to think about it this way. If you're someone like Ryan Ellis, who finally reaches this point where he gets to develop his own world, he creates a strong creative vision, he gets $200 million of investment to make this vision, and then shows this to Sony and gets another $200 million worth of investment. This is kind of a point where you can't fail. This project has become too big to fail. And I think in more ways than one, it's too big to fail in terms of there's so much money invested in this that there's no way this can fail. And also, so many big players have invested in this. How can it fail? Like, wouldn't anybody tell me by this point that my creative vision is flawed if they're putting $400 million into it? If I raise $200 million and then get another $200 million from not a small player, from Sony, one of the biggest players in video games, don't I have to reach the point where I become so confident in my vision and what we're doing that I say, listen, we have a vision, we know what we're doing, we know where we're headed. I don't want to hear a bunch of side criticisms telling me that the train has no brakes. Because at the time, they didn't know the train had no brakes. But that's basically what I imagine some people were saying. Oh, this might be a bit of an issue. That might be a bit of an issue. I think this is something we should adjust. I think when you're running that train and you've got that much of a payload on it, $400 million, you just got to go, go, go. Right? And this is his first time, this Ryan Ellis man. This is his first time directing this, a game of his own, with that much money, with all that on the line. You've just got to go for it. You got to swing for the fences. There's no looking back. So I don't necessarily blame this toxic positivity culture from coming around, because that's what you inevitably are going to get when you have a young team working with massive amounts of money and working with someone that clearly has a strong creative vision and assumes that that's what you're paying for. And I want to extend things out a little bit further, because it's not just Concord. This, I think, is a bit indicative of Sony and PlayStation's overall strategy now, and why I have an issue with it. Right? Recently, we had an interview with the Financial Times. Sony CFO stating that Sony doesn't have enough new IP. It doesn't have enough IP. It needs more. And people just tore into this, right? They're like, is this guy an idiot? So PlayStation has so much IP to draw from. I mean, play Astrobot. The game is literally built off of having a bunch of different Astro's bot friends dressed up as various different Sony properties that haven't been touched in years. You know, Sony's got Sly Cooper, Jack and Daxter, Ape Escape, Gravity Rush, Patapon, Loco Roco, Jumping Flash, Parappa the Rapper, Jammer Lammy. Like the list goes on, right? I didn't even touch some of the bigger pieces. God, Fat Princess. I loved Fat Princess on PS3 and PSP. But that's not what the CFO is talking about. That's what I think people missed. I think a lot of people focused on what are you, an idiot? But they have to think about this. He's the chief financial officer. What does he mean by they don't have enough IP? Sony doesn't do small game development anymore. What he means by Sony doesn't have enough IP is that Sony doesn't have enough IP that they can invest $200 million plus into right now. Because Sony doesn't do small game development and slow scaling up like, say, a company like Nintendo does oftentimes, where they put out a game they give it a modest budget, they put it out there, and if it does well, then they scale up development from there. Or they give it more sequels from that point onwards. Sony wants to come out of the gate at $200 million plus and have it be immediately viable as a series, as an IP. And I mean, you can't do that with any of their current IP that they don't already have faith in. I mean, do you think Sony could put $200 million plus behind Sly Cooper and get a return on investment? Jack and Daxter? Maybe. Patapon? No, obviously. Fat Princess? No. But that's how Sony operates now. It's a boom-bust system. They put a bunch of money into a game to make a bunch of money, and that's how they're functioning now. They don't do small. They only do big. So those IPs don't fit that. They want a quick fix. They're like a junkie. They want a quick fix. And that is what they were hoping Concord would be for them. Put a bunch of money into this, get a bunch of money out. And the biggest problem I have with this is because this stifles creative vision. Because Ryan Ellis here and his team, Firewalk, working on Concord, they did have a strong creative vision. There's no getting around that. But it was on something that's so much money invested into it that it would have been better off. I think Sony would have been better off getting a competent crew rather than a creative crew. Because what Sony wants is safe. They want stuff that they can guarantee is going to be. They want to get rid of as much risk as possible while using one of the riskiest strategies in AAA gaming, which is making big, major games, but also playing it safe by making sure the content is guaranteed to be great. That's, I guess what they thought they had with Concord, but clearly Concord's creative vision was very strong, but was not something the market was interested in. And so when we talk about Concord, the failure of Concord, we talk about major game development at Sony, right? I think it's just there's such a temptation to look at this from the outside and be very heckling and be very simple about it and say, oh my gosh, how didn't they see it coming? This is so stupid. When we could take a moment, slow down, break it all down, and realize the reason we need to talk about Concord still is because Concord is not an exception. Concord is the rule at Sony now. When the CFO says they're looking for new IP and they need new IP, they're talking about stuff at the level of Concord. So unless Sony learns from this failure of Concord, we're going to get more of this kind of thing. When you have a creative vision built up at that level with that much money into it, and especially when you have a team that's not all that experienced, it's going to be so much more susceptible to that toxic positivity mentality, to that too big to fail mentality. And that's not going to end unless Sony either changes course and realizes that investing in their IP at a more modest budget and then scaling up is much better than putting all their money into these into like a new IP and praying that it takes off. Like, until Sony either shifts their strategy or recognizes that they have to be much more careful about what IP they choose when they go at this $200 million plus budget at the jump. If they're not realize they have to be super careful about the development of that, this is going to happen again. So that's what I wanted to talk about. I know this is a bit of a longer video and a longer discussion, but I felt that this was a topic that just, I feel like there's not a whole lot of serious discussion about this, and I feel like it often gets obfuscated with bad faith people who just want to, you know, shit on Concord because they don't like Sony, or they just don't like wokeism or DEI or whatever the hell all that stuff means, all that right-wing talking point nonsense. And I just, it just ticked me off, and I read this article and I wanted to talk about that. So hopefully this was elucidating to some degree. Hopefully you stuck around. My last video was like 12 minutes and people apparently stuck around for only about 4 minutes of it, so maybe I'm just boring. I do understand these videos are a bit of a time investment, but I really appreciate you sticking with me. These are like, I like to think these are like podcast videos. You know, you can just put them on in the background, listen to me talk, and then that's kind of great. You don't have to be looking at this ugly mug all the time. But anyways, let me know in the comments what you think about this, what you think about Sony's, AAA development style strategy at the moment. If you also feel that Concord is, once again, the rule, not the exception, with what Sony's looking for in new IP. And, yeah, like and subscribe, please. It's a young channel. I don't like saying that kind of thing, but apparently I read that if you mention it, people are more likely to do so, not because they find it annoying or anything, but because a lot of people just don't think about it. So, just reminding you, like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and share, of course. And yeah, that's it. So this is Unending Quandary saying thank you for watching and or listening, and I'll see you again real soon.